All right, so we'll officially get started. Tonight we're doing our Q&A on dietary supplements and trying to navigate through what is helpful and what might be a little bit more harmful. So I'm going to put up and share a PowerPoint so that we can go through. I'm a visual person, so I like to be able to show you exactly what I'm talking about. If there are any questions, especially while I'm actually in the share mode, feel free just to clear your throat and say, can I ask a question? Because sometimes it's harder for me to notice the chats right away. Let me go here. All right. So let's go on. I'll minimize us out. You can't see us. All right. So dietary supplements. So obviously, as a dietitian, I would always say we want to do food versus pills. And there's a lot of evidence as we go through tonight that there can be benefits to taking supplements when we're deficient in certain, nutrients, but trying to get it all from pills is definitely not ideal and sometimes can be dangerous to people's health. So we don't want to just take it for granted that, well, I'll just take, this pill, this, or a combination of various ones, thinking that they're actually going to be the key to health. They can promote good health when used correctly, but used just randomly, there can actually be a lot more health concerns. So in this, we have our 13 essential vitamins, meaning we need these in order to have a lot of different functions going on in our body. So I have our listed out, 13 essential vitamins and then a list of 13 essential minerals. So we get an idea of what are they, what do they do, and then also you'll notice on the slide I have the DRI, and that's our, the recommended daily intake that we should be having, and that's a good reference point so that you're not exceeding your intake, because we want an idea of how much is supposed to help me, but I also don't want to do triple, quadruple that dose thinking more is better. We have various amounts of like fat soluble vitamins. And the very first one would be vitamin A is fat soluble. And then on my next slide, we have our D, E, and K are also fat soluble. And when something is fat soluble, it can be stored within the fat stores in our body and can stay in for a longer period of time. So with vitamins like that, because they can store and build up in your system, if you're doing excessive amounts of them, over time, it could come to a toxic level. Now, from food, that's a lot harder to do unless you're only eating certain amounts, certain foods, and eating large quantities of them. Our body is actually much better able to manage vitamins and minerals when they come from food because you're not absorbing huge quantities at any one time. So, you'll notice in vitamin A, we say it's good for cell formation, it's an antioxidant, it's good for eye health, and you'll see it's in a lot of our like orange vegetables and then spinach, like sweet potatoes, carrots, mangoes, and even in liver, obviously, liver is a big storage area. So if you're eating the animal of other livers, or liver of other animals, you can get more vitamin A, but you'd have to be eating excessive quantities of those foods in order to do too much vitamin A. What we're looking for men are about 900 micrograms, and women about 700 micrograms. Now, if we're doing too much of these things, and that's where you can run into, doing too little, you're going to have a lot more problems as far as overall health because it's an antioxidant. It's going to be a little slower on healing and repair since it works with our cell formation. But in excessive quantities, you can have nausea, intracranial pressure, obviously lots of pressure within your brain, coma, and even death. So you have to be mindful of not having too much of any of these vitamins. So that be careful, especially when you're getting into fat soluble. Since we're talking about fat soluble, we might as well jump right over to our D, E, and our K. I mean, vitamin D, not enough can be said for it. It's so great for our body. It helps with maintaining our calcium balance. It's a very important part of our immune system. So a lot of you, I assume, would already be on a D supplement. And I am a conservative when it comes to vitamins and minerals. I'm not someone who's just like, yeah, take whatever you think is good. But I do think we will benefit from vitamin D, especially now as we're currently, when this is being live streamed, getting into fall and a little bit darker here up north. We want to make sure we're getting adequate vitamin D within our diet. And most of the way we get that would be, egg yolks, liver, fatty fish, fortified milk. So if you're not eating, larger quantities of those, it is beneficial to look at doing a D3 vitamin in order to get what you need. The RDA is about 400 to 600 IUs for men and women. When we're getting into older adults, like if we say 65 and older, they'd push that even higher, saying about 800 IUs would be beneficial. With this, you can go a bit higher without it being concerning. Often, if you're seeing a doctor and they're putting you on vitamin D for a deficiency, they might have you on 5,000 units, for in 1 week for like a shorter period of times, maybe for a month. But doing an amount that's, 1,000 to 2,000 IUs has shown to be safe if you're doing that on your own or under the guidance of a doctor. But anything higher than that, I would not recommend without your doctor telling you to take that. Looking at vitamin E, another good immune system vitamin. We do want to make sure we're getting enough of that, especially with, cold and flu season and COVID still being part of our world. We want to make sure we're having a strong immune system. It's an antioxidant, promotes heart health. We can get it within wheat germs, sunflower seeds, oils, nuts. Again, thinking a little bit more fatty foods because it's a fat soluble vitamin. About 15 milligrams per day is all you need. So a lot of times this would be a good beneficial thing. It's not a huge quantity, so you may be getting enough, and we'll get into the concept of multivitamins and how much to look for in there. And finally, vitamin K, which is great for promoting blood clotting and healthy bones. It's our other fat soluble vitamins. So we see this in our green leafy vegetables and meat, cheeses, eggs, berries, figs. We only need about 90 micrograms for women and 120 micrograms for men. So with vitamin K, the only time to be real mindful of exactly how much you're eating is if you are on something like a blood thinner, like warfarin, where it is more sensitive to changes in diet, especially in foods like vitamin K that promote blood clotting. So in that case, you would not want to be varying your food a lot or going on and off supplements where that vitamin K level would be changing day to day. You have to think consistency, especially in terms of other treatments and medications going on within your life. So the other two vitamins on this page would be your vitamin C. It's an antioxidant. It helps with iron absorption, incredibly important as far as our overall health. Most people at some point have seen or possibly had vitamin C supplement, even in the terms of packs like Emergency, that is often popular in the time that when we are doing our winter colds. And it's beneficial. Having enough vitamin C is helpful in order to make sure that we're staying healthy, but it's not a huge quantity that we need. We're looking at having like 90 milligrams for men and about 75 milligrams for women, maybe up to 100. But too much of this, even when you look in terms of things like kidney stone formation, you have to be careful of not overdoing supplements, because doing mega doses of these could be promoting more kidney stones, and people don't even realize. They're thinking it's just something that's going to help prevent me from getting a common cold. So be aware of how much is in there and how it might affect other conditions going on. The rest of our essential vitamins would be all our B vitamins. And you'll notice as we glance through the list, they come in various area or various types of foods. Like our B1 or thiamine is mostly like pork loin, green beans, brown rice, pinto beans, baked potato. It's great for metabolism and energy production. And, from 1.1 to 1.2 milligrams per day between men and women in order to maintain that good metabolism. B2 and B3, we're looking at more conversions of glucose, more energy production. We can see synthesizing, cells and breaking down carbs and fats. So a lot of these are in more meat based foods or animal based foods like eggs and milk and salmon and chicken. You'll see a lot of that. not a huge amount needed, about 1.3 milligrams for men, 1.1 for B2, and also for women, or sorry, B3, we're looking at a little different. We want about 14 to 16 milligrams per day. B12, I'm going to skip to the bottom of the list because most of the rest of those B vitamins you notice are metabolism and also just converting things like the protein, the fat, and the carbohydrates that we eat into energy. That's their primary purpose. B12 helps synthesize a lot of enzymes. It forms DNA. And it also helps break down fats and proteins. B12 is one of those foods that's primarily in animal-based foods. So you'll see oysters and crab and beef and salmon and eggs on here. So this is something to be aware of if you follow more of a vegetarian or vegan diet and do not get a high amount of B12. It can affect how your energy is. In those cases, it's good to take a supplement, 2.4 micrograms for men or women, or I often will recommend with B12, it's great to have like nutritional yeast, which is kind of a cheesy flaked food that you can add onto foods as a natural way of getting more B12 for people who are, not getting as many animal products into their diet. So we'll switch on. So just like we have 13 essential vitamins, we also have 13 essential minerals. We have, top of the list, iron, really important as far as red blood cell formation. It's a key part of proteins and enzymes. And iron is obviously going to come from animal products, animal like muscle or beans and legumes. You'll notice the amount varies. The biggest difference in this intake is between women who are between the ages of 18 or 50, and that's in that premenopausal range where you still have the menstrual cycle. That will bump up the amount of iron needed just because monthly you're going through a cycle where you're losing a lot of red blood cells and need to replete that once that cycle has gone through again. Postmenopausal, the needs of women are the same as men. We have that 8 milligrams a day. And it's important if you're getting a variety of foods where you can get your iron, or using cast iron, pans in order to cook foods so that you can pick up some of the iron needs that way. But you do, if you notice the red blood cells are low, sometimes, physicians might recommend doing an iron supplement. Going on the conservative side is always the best way to start when it comes to iron, because it can be a little more constipating, a little uncomfortable with it. And we'll talk about how much we should be looking for in our multivitamin. But looking at the big gap in those needs, if you are falling into a range where you're either a male or a postmenopausal woman, then make sure you're getting a supplement that is lower in iron. You definitely don't need to bump up to 18 milligrams if you're not constantly having a turnover in your red blood cells, unless your physician recommends this. Zinc is another important thing for, energy or enzyme activity, and also wound healing, and promotes a good, healthy immune system. So having zinc in our diet is good. Again, you're going to see that it's in a lot of animal products and then some fortified cereals to get those. Men and women are pretty close to the amount that we need, about 8 milligrams for women and 11 milligrams for men. So keep your zinc intake up, and that should definitely help as we get through this next winter season. Calcium is probably, with minerals in general, they're earthbound minerals that we break down, we can absorb, and for the most part, they're not huge quantities that we need in our diet. We can get it from a varied diet. If you eat a variety of different fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, you will be able to get, for the most part, most of these essential minerals that you need, not needing to cherry pick and have everything separate. The one thing that probably is the biggest disparity would be calcium, just because the amount that we need is much higher. And for the most part, because we're trying to maintain bone health and, also helps with muscle contraction and hormone production, we want to make sure we're getting enough. So having a balance between what we might get in a daily supplement and what we get in food can be beneficial. So 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams is that range for men and women, and having at least half of that coming in a supplement and half of it coming from food might be the best balance if you are not someone who eats a lot of dairy products or, sardines and fortified foods. Sodium is generally something that most of us in the American diet get plenty of, unless you are following a very rigid diet where you make everything yourself. For the most part, we don't run into people who are sodium deficient. Less than 12 or 2,300 milligrams for adults is what's recommended just for good heart health. We need salt in our diet because it keeps our heart pumping. It keeps our fluids balanced. You don't want to take away all salt, but being mindful that you're not being excessive on it. You do not need a huge amount in order to get what you need to stay healthy. The next one. All right, so now we're going to look at the next page. So we have our phosphorus, potassium, copper, magnesium, iodine, manganese, and then sulfur. So phosphorus, good for energy, not something most of us run too low in. It's pretty high in dairy products. Most people are not going to need any extra supplementation of this, only 700 milligrams per day. But if you're getting a variety of grains, dairy, nuts, and seeds, you're going to get all your phosphorus. Potassium is one of those things that will come up a lot in different diets. It works with body functions in the kidney and the heart. So in terms of kidney health, we want a good variety of it. If people do have issues with kidney disease, depending on what's going on when they're getting their annual labs checked, the potassium level is always checked with a general breakdown of your electrolytes. So you'll get to see, is the potassium staying in a good range? If the potassium range is way too high, that's the only time you might be a little bit more cautious with certain foods. Like you'll see tomatoes, bananas, apricots, orange juice, milk, lentils. It's in a lot of different foods. So usually more people might run into the issue where they notice things like muscle cramping. If they've exercised and they're not hydrating really well, they notice some muscle stiffness or cramping at night. Sometimes it can be a drop in that electrolyte because you haven't repleted that after doing either more strenuous exercise or when it's really hot out and you're sweating more. That's when we'll say, eat a banana, get some orange juice that can help reduce some of the cramping. So that's probably the majority of what people would run across. But it's similar into like sodium, where sodium is about 2,300 milligrams per day and potassium is about 2,600 milligrams per day. And for the most part, you don't need to build up on that too much. Magnesium is another one that often comes up because you'll see it gets a lot of press as far as blood sugar control, blood pressure, possibly helping with depression, can decrease like your nervous system functioning. So there's a lot more coming up where people are looking at getting magnesium supplements, but you want to make sure you're not, again, overdoing it, because it sounds like it helps so many different things. Looking at the foods it comes in, we have our whole grains and legumes and milk products. If you're varying that, that's going to be the direction you want to go in order to up that magnesium amount. I'll show you some magnesium supplements in our guidelines of why we don't want to do too much once we stop the slideshow. But I would always edge a little lower on magnesium. Women, that 310 to 320 milligrams, men's only a little bit higher at 400 to 420. Keep it around there. It's important. All right, we're going to move past the rest of these and kind of jump into select supplements that are geared towards, cancer survivors. And I only bring these as kind of cherry picking a few things because they might come up in publications, or, oh, you should take this because you're dealing with cancer treatments or post-cancer. Black cohosh is one thing that's been used by Native Americans to naturally treat like hot flashes and symptoms related to menopause. So sometimes it's brought up or comes up in, little pop-ups on the computer about trying to use that during treatments for breast cancer, or if people are having any side effects related to treatments. And they really found there's no evidence that black cohosh helps in the side effects of any sort of cancer treatments with hot flashes. I don't even know how much it really helps as far as, general health with hot flashes, but that's generally where it'll come up. And there is always that risk it could be toxic to the liver. Now, with these supplements, a lot of them, there's not always an upper limit or a dose amount. Some of them you'll see it's on there, others not necessarily, because it hasn't been FDA tested and looked at in several clinical trials. And when you don't have clinical trials, it's hard to get a recommendation of this is how much you should take, this is what's safe, and this is what might be too much. Not to say that there is not a benefit to a lot of naturopathic medicines, but you need to make sure, first of all, you're working with someone who really understands those medicines. I am not a naturopath, so I will always defer and say be conservative with it, because you don't want to overdo something that you're not sure. You'll notice with a lot of these under concerns, the main thing that will bump up, you'll see it in coenzyme 10. We also see it in EPA and DHA, or the omega-3 fatty acids. Sorry. And then I think those are the two big ones. Is it could interfere with, and St. John's wort. It might interfere with blood clotting. So if you are someone who is on blood thinners, like you have had a condition with blood clots, you have atrial fibrillation, you are taking warfarin or another blood thinner, then it's always important to bring up any extra supplements you're taking and let your physician know, so that they can either counsel you saying, okay, we need to maybe stop the extra supplement, or you need to only use so much, or you need to not change the dose around. So it's important to be very open and honest, even with quote unquote natural supplements, because they do still have effect on your body and on other medications you could be taking. So CoQ10 is usually used with heart health, and also sometimes used along with chemotherapy drugs, thinking it might decrease toxicity, not really showing anything about decreasing toxicity or heart health, but there's not a lot of evidence saying it doesn't help heart health. So for anyone who's taking CoQ10 and it's taken it for a decade, as long as you're going on a conservative amount, not doing double doses or more than what the packagings tell you, it might be helpful, but don't think it's going to turn around all of your heart problems. You still have to think about a healthy diet and exercise. Now, real natural foods, on here we see turmeric and we also see garlic. The two great anti-inflammatories, things that I often will cook with and recommend that people use. For both of these, there's not really a significant concern when it's taken as food. Turmeric is a powder, so they really just powder it and it's in a gel cap. If you don't use it in cooking, if you're not crazy about the flavor, it could just be in a gel cap. And it has some promising evidence that it could be beneficial. So if you don't like cooking with it, you could use it in gel caps. Garlic is another one. It could interfere with certain medications, but when you're using it as food, you're not really seeing the interference coming in because you're not concentrating. There's really only so much garlic you can eat at any one time or cook with. So when it's in supplement form, it could always be a bit higher than what a normal diet would allow. And the final thing is apple cider vinegar. This comes up, if you Google apple cider vinegar, it will tell you it is going to solve the world's problems. I mean, it curbs appetite, weight loss, decrease blood glucose levels, aid in digestion, boost the immune system. There's so many benefits that pop up that it's really hard to track all of it. Really what they found, it's, at worst, as far as concerns, was it could decrease potassium if you're taking a lot of it. So if you have a lot of issues with low potassium levels and leg cramps, then maybe be more mindful of what you're taking. And sometimes it can cause skin irritation, tooth erosion, and chemical burns. And that's because people use it incorrectly. It is still an acid. It is a vinegar that's high in acidity. So if you are putting it on your skin to help, solve a skin problem, but you're not diluting it, or you're drinking it straight, you could cause a lot of skin irritation or tooth erosion because that high acid content is getting direct contact. So it's important with that to dilute it. Don't drink it straight. I believe most people have like a tablespoon of it, but you really want to dilute it in liquid so that you're not getting this high concentration going directly on, sensitive skin areas, either externally or internally. And there is some promise it could be beneficial for blood glucose levels or possibly improve cholesterol, but not in pill form, more in the actual vinegar. And I'll show you the actual vinegar you should be using. So, we're looking at American Cancer Society guidelines as far as nutrition. The saying is, having a general multivitamin during and after treatment is likely beneficial. But we're also looking at multivitamins that aren't going over 100% of that recommended daily allowance. We don't want to be tripling doses. You really want to be mindful that you're looking at what kind of multivitamin you're taking. Herbs and high dose supplements, you really should be checking with your medical team before and after any cancer treatments and make sure that you're not taking anything that can interfere with any therapies that are ongoing. So that you are getting the most benefit out of your medical treatment. Herbs aren't FDA tested or regulated, so there could be other additives beyond just what that active ingredient is that might be a problem, that it may not be on the label. Now, there's been a lot of updating to the Fair Labeling Act and making sure that people are made aware, but with some smaller companies, certain things can go under the radar. So just be mindful of where you're getting your herbal supplements. Now, I did get a good tip on this. I had another patient I was talking to, and this made a lot of sense, is their physician had said, if you're going to get herbal supplements, get them from Canada, because they do testing on them and regulate them. So what those supplements are or actually what's in the bottle. Now, it's a little more challenging now during COVID. There's a lot of shipping back and forth, but should you be in Canada and looking at supplements, just be aware they do regulate them differently than we do here. So it might be something with a lot of those herbals that would be possibly a little safer than what you might get from a smaller manufacturer in the United States. So, and remember, vitamins, minerals work together in complex way. So it affects absorption and processing and affects the way our body runs. The body is better able to get them out of food. So even though we talk about pills and doses, and sometimes we don't always know exactly how much of this is in this little bit, how much garlic, how many cloves do I eat? Just think about a varied diet is much more important than focusing on milligrams that I'm getting from every single bite of my food. For centuries, that's how people ate, just trying to get a variety of foods, keep me as healthy as possible, and not expecting that I need to overdo any one thing in order to be better. So herbals or botanicals or anything from plants that treat illnesses. Research is limited, so be aware. You want to be careful when you're picking things where there's not a lot of research. Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, that gives the FDA permission to stop production, but only if there's been proven that an herbal or a supplement has caused risk to health, not beforehand. So unfortunately, for something to be out and potentially harm someone, like you think about in the ephedra or the fen-phen time, when they finally realized that it was causing heart valve issues, but it'd been on the market for a while, and you had to see that occur in people before they could finally say, we can't have that on the market anymore. Right now, we do have this USP accreditation. It's the US Pharmacopoeia, which is a dietary supplement regulation program. What's nice with this is it's a nonprofit and it's voluntary. So, supplement companies that want to be able to go and say, hey, take the medications we have, take all of our testing, look at how we're producing this, and they can, USP can go through and verify what's in there. And if they pass all the testing and the document review, they'll actually give this USP verification onto the bottle. So that gives you a lot more confidence that what you're taking in is actually what you were hoping, was in that bottle. You can go to a list, there's verified products on uspverified.org. You can also, if you're looking at the labels or just peruse around when you're in the pharmacy, if that's how you're shopping, you can also see it. It's always displayed, right on the front. The last thing we're going to look at, and I'll exit out of here and show you, is there is this NIH Office of Dietary Supplements, and I have a link here that shows you the fact sheets. Now, I wrote it all out because sometimes with government websites, it's a lot of clicking around before you could find it. I now have it tabbed on my, I'm going to stop sharing on my desktop so that I can show you that. And we'll actually go here. We'll pull the tab down. Here we go. Of course, I should have had this tab down before I got it here. All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. One moment. I just have to pull it up when I'm not on the screen with you so I can show you what it looks like. All right, that's working. Let's minimize this. All right, so now we're going to share again, and I can show you where that is right here. So once you're in this dietary supplement fact sheet on that link, it doesn't have absolutely everything you might be looking for, but it does give you a variety of different, you'll see vitamin A's on here. We have acai, if you're activated charcoal. So if there's something you're looking into, wondering, should I be taking it or not, you could always go to that, click the bold print, and it will give you, what is it? It'll give you a nice breakdown. Sometimes it could be, possibly effective for, here, activated charcoal is good for in the treatment of poisoning. And it's nice because it will give you a lot of information that you may not know if you had never actually clicked on it. Also within, if you're just going under vitamin A, the right general vitamins that you do recognize, they have great sheets that really break everything down with recommendations all the way, all ages, all different types of things going on in your life, and a really good breakdown of what is it good for, what is it bad. So it is a great option in order to be able to evaluate for yourself when you're like, well, what about this? Because I'll be honest, I can talk about a few things, but I can't absolutely talk about absolutely everything that could be in our diet. There's so many different areas that you can go to when it comes to what sort of vitamins and minerals. But I'll show you this USP. This is a multivitamin you'll see from Kirkland, and here it has the USP certification. So it means they've gone through their testing. When we're talking about RDAs, this is going to be a little bit harder to see, but I'll try to do it on here if I'm able to. What they're looking at is this daily percentage. So over here, when they say value and you're looking, what value is it? What you're trying to find is, for the most part, it's not going excessively over. You'll notice a few things on here might be 200%, some are 50%. You want to be careful you're not, all those aren't like 200, 300, 500% of your daily recommended allowance, so that you're not getting this excessive amount of vitamins and minerals that for some people might cause more of a problem. But if I'm trying to pick a multivitamin, if I just, multivitamins is multi, it's got a lot of different ones. It doesn't always have absolutely everything, but the 7 things that can be most important in a multivitamin, and you just have to look at me, I don't have this written down on a slide. It's going to be, first of all, looking for vitamin D. Already said, most of us are a little more deficient when we're getting into fall and winter and we have less sunlight. So getting, that at least 600 IUs a day from the vitamin D is a good way of being on that like minimum side. If you're deficient, then it should be higher. And that's where you may be using 1,000, 2,000 IUs per day, still at a safe level where you wouldn't worry that it's going to be overdone. But for sure, vitamin D, even if it's just a little gel cap that you're taking, if it's not in your, regular multivitamin, that is beneficial beneficial. Magnesium. Magnesium is good because it helps, I mean, it can help with regulating sleep, decreasing stress. It's good for muscles, good for blood glucose, but you don't want to go more than 300 to about 350 milligrams per day. And that's the women's RDA that we're looking at, not even higher. And I'll tell you why. Because magnesium, if anyone's ever had or remember the word milk of magnesia, if you take too much magnesium, you can be nauseated. It could also cause severe diarrhea. So sometimes you don't realize that. That's why they have labeling on here. Now I use this because it's like a small canister, and the dose on here, I'll get it close enough you can see. So for 2 teaspoons, you're getting 325 milligrams. That would be fine. You can do 2 teaspoons, and that is going to give you what you need. I've had family members who thought just grab a spoon out of a drawer, like a regular soup spoon, took 2 of those. Now you're at about 6 times your dose for the day. It was not a good day. So be mindful when they're giving you dosages to follow it exactly. If they're saying teaspoon, they mean a measuring teaspoon. Don't just grab anything to dose it out. Multivitamin should also have our calcium in it. You know, you can only absorb 500 milligrams at a time when it comes to calcium. So trying to overdo it and get 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams in one pill is really counterintuitive because you're only going to absorb half of it. Most of the time in a multi, it'll be about 500 to 600 milligrams for a pill. And that's all you need. The rest you could get from your food. You know, if you're doing more dairy products, usually a cup of yogurt, a cup of milk is about 320 milligrams, roughly, more or less. Or if you're going to take a separate you can take a separate calcium pill that's about 500 if you don't really do a lot of calcium foods or calcium fortified foods, and that would be fine too to help promote good bone health, especially depending on certain treatments. If people are on, you know, long-term treatments for breast cancer, like aromatase inhibitors can cause bone loss. So getting enough calcium is really important to make sure you're not running into problems with osteoporosis or osteopenia later in life. You also want to get zinc in your multivitamin. You don't need a huge amount, about 5 milligrams would be good. 5 to 10 is a decent range. So that should be there. Multivitamin having some iron in it is helpful because most of us may not get quite enough in our diet depending on how varied it is. No more than 8 milligrams. You don't really need much more than that unless you're deficient. And then it's good to sort of push more iron containing foods. So that's not such a high dose that can be, again, a little bit, irritating to the stomach or constipating if you're on like a high dose iron supplement. Folate's great, especially for people who, in the time that you're trying to get pregnant and, development of the fetus, but post that, nails can help them grow. It can help with, inflammation and decreasing that. Also potentially help with depression. So folate of about 400 micrograms is beneficial. And the B12 that we mentioned earlier, because it's that good energy breakdown of micronutrients. So getting about 1 to 2 micrograms of your B12 can be beneficial long-term, and usually getting like a methyl B12, especially for people who maybe are doing a little bit more plant-based foods and not getting as many of the animal proteins into their diet. And the last thing I said I'd show you was going to be the apple cider vinegar. So if you are choosing apple cider vinegar, try to get out of the glare of my light, you really want to be using the actual vinegar. It's usually should be cloudy a lot of times on here, and they'll say at the bottom of this, with mother, that's that cloudiness, that's some of those good enzymes in there that can help you absorb it. So apple cider vinegar is shown to have some good health benefits, but only like couple teaspoons to a tablespoon, and always diluted, never having it straight. So I'm going to, if we're still live streaming, I'll throw it out if anyone has any questions that they wanted to ask since we're in the midst of this. Otherwise, that has, we've sort of covered all of our supplements. I'm going to stop the live stream. So I want to thank all of you for joining us and listening to this. And I hope that it has helped you in order to answer some questions about what are good options for me when it comes to vitamins and minerals, and in what areas should I be a little bit more cautious. So eat a varied diet, stay healthy, and be mindful of anything else that you're choosing to add to your diet.